you have your Bibles, turn to Leviticus chapter 18 this morning. We'll be reading from chapter 18 and chapter 20. And we will be in the court this morning. Third book of the Bible. Your phone ever ring and you know what they want when the phone rings?
If my youngin' calls,
They want money.
every time something happens with her between her and mama, or there's a money issue.
Well, that was the call I got Friday. I seen the phone ring. I was in a meeting. I couldn't answer it, but I felt it buzz and picked it up and said, Chris Carter. And I knew what he wanted. And the only reason that I knew is I had ran into Shane at lunch, I guess it was, in the break room, or I don't remember when it was, but I ran into him or talked to somebody and knew that Danny was going to be gone, and I just assumed that Chris was going to be bringing a message this morning. So I said, he's looking for somebody to teach. And so he left me a voicemail, and I shot him a quick text. I said, I'm in interviews and meetings till 5 o'clock. I'll call you when I start home. So I guess about 6 o'clock is when I finally got a hold of him. So anyway, y'all just pray for me this morning that I'll be able to bring out this lesson. I tell you, I can't. As I sat there Friday night and I pulled the quarterly out, I told y'all before, sometimes it clicks and sometimes it don't, but just as soon as I started reading what the lesson was about, it just seemed like that it clicked, that the Lord was, that's what he was laying on my heart to teach on us from this lesson, but I've struggled. So y'all just overlooked me this morning. The short notice part of it doesn't bother me. I mean, I've been contacted on Saturday night before somebody wanted me to teach come Sunday morning, so that, really didn't bother me, but as I continue to read and study the lesson, I really just think that the devil did not want me to teach his lesson this morning. I think he's tried to throw every obstacle in my way that he could because he doesn't want y'all to hear what God's got to say through his word this morning. And when it comes to the Old Testament, I typically struggle anyhow, but like I said, as far as the Scripture's concerned, that didn't bother me, but just being able to get it in the right words. Y'all just pray for me this morning. We live in the title of the lesson talks about living in holiness and living in a society when you hear so many people's ideas throughout the world of what they think is okay and what they think is right and what they think. Sometimes they try to tell you how God feels on the subject. And a lot of times they're as far from this book as you can be. But one of the things that stood out to me, the lesson's going to talk about living a separate lifestyle in 2 or 3 different areas. But one of the things I read from the lesson, and I think it's in the first part of the quarterly there as well, it stated that research has shown that there is little measurable difference between Christians and non-Christians. Think about that for just a minute. Research has shown that there is little measurable difference between Christians and non-Christians. And that's exactly the way the devil would want it. He wants to water down this word to where it sounds good to our ears, it makes us feel comfortable, but doesn't give us that closeness and this holiness that today's lesson talks about. We need to be, I don't know about we, but I, this morning, need to be reminded that I'm supposed to be living a life of holiness. And I fall short every day. And if we're not careful, as we go through life, we will blend in with society. When in reality, we ought to be sticking out like a sore thumb. The first part of the lesson starts in chapter 18, and it's the first 5 verses. But before I read it, like I said, the title of the lesson is Living in Holiness. Well, what is holiness? Well, the lesson defines it as to be set apart from the world, but also to be set apart unto God. And we'll start in verse number 1. It says, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speaking to the children of Israel, saying to them, I am the Lord your God. After the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein ye dwelt, shall ye not do. And after the doings of the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, shall ye not do. Neither shall ye walk in their ordinances. Ye shall do my judgments, and keep mine ordinances, to walk therein. I am the Lord your God. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Lord. So we see here that God's talking to Moses. He's giving him instructions to give to the children of Israel. And right here in this first passage talks about what our first point is. He's telling them to be separate from society's standards. And I've already touched on that a little bit, that we are to be separate from our society standards. Society today will tell you that this is okay, and that's okay. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we need to be determining what God says is our standard for living, what He says we ought to be doing, and how we ought to be living our lives. But we see here that He tells them that, in a nutshell, kind of just to summarize what He said here in the first 3 verses, He said, you're familiar with the Egyptians and their style of life. And you're familiar with the Canaanites and their style of life. Do not act like they do. Do not do what you saw them do. He goes on in verses 4 and 5 and tells them to do His judgments and to keep His ordinances. And I'm about to get way ahead of myself here, but anyway. These doings that He mentions in verse 3, after the doings of the land of Egypt, these doings covered a multitude of things, but a lot of it included wicked sexual practices as well as customs that would lead to broken family relationships. And we're going to talk about that broken family relationship as we get on into the second and third point this morning. The surrounding nations of the Israelites had the allurement of these false gods. And He was warning the Israelites ahead of time that although what they saw seemed appealing and it seemed inviting to them, ultimately, if they led in that same lifestyle, it would lead to death. But He gives them an alternate there in verses 4 and 5. He says, Ye shall do my judgments and keep mine ordinances, to walk therein. I am the Lord your God. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Lord. Judgments here talked about laws in general, and ordinances was that which is enacted or decreed. Notice something that He says in verse number, it's verse 5. He says you're to do and to keep. He mentions both, doing and keeping. He don't want us to just have a surface obedience. He wants it to be from the heart. He don't want it just to be on the outside. He wants it to be on the inside too. You know, and it's easy for us to look at the Israelites and condemn them from where they fell away from God. Well, what happens to us when we examine our own lives? I'm not talking about examining our lives as a church body. I'm talking about examining our lives individually and as a family. You know, as I sat and thought about this, I thought to myself, am I living separate from society standards? Is what's going on in my home different than what's going on in the average lost person's home? If the Lord came back and came into my house, could He look at what's going on there and be able to tell the difference of what's happening there and what's happening in some lost person's home. Ralph's shaking his head. A lot of times not. I mean, you just think about.
That right there, that'll get on you right there.
I mean, and I'm not saying that I come into your home and y'all are partying and carrying on, or I'm partying and carrying on, but just thinking about, are we sitting down, are we taking time with our family to discuss His Word? What are we allowing to be piped into our homes? Through the television? Through the internet? Through all types of social media? What are we allowing our children and ourselves to watch and see? Oh, it's just, it's funny. It's just, you know, it's just common. We won't hurt to watch it. Oh, me. You know, this program, I love to watch this program. I like this actor. Well, listen to the way they're talking. In the 30 minutes or the hour that it's on, they're saying stuff that we don't say, we don't let our children repeat, so why should we let them watch it? If we're going to be separate from today's society, it's going to take a conscious effort on our part and to do our part to live a life that is opposite of this world. The second part talks about separate from sinful practices. And it picks up in verse 20. It says, "Moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with thy neighbor's wife, to defile thyself with her. And thou shalt not let any of the seed pass through the fire to Moloch. Neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination. Neither shalt thou lie with any beast to defile thyself therewith. Neither shall any woman stand before a beast to lie down thereunto. It is confusion. Defile not ye yourselves in any of these things. For in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you. And the land is defiled. Therefore I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it. And the land itself vomiteth out her inhabitants. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you." God here lists several behaviors that, number one, that Israel was not to participate in. Number two, we today, as His children, should participate in. This list included adultery. It included child sacrifice. It included profaning God's name, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. It talked about homosexuality and bestiality. Bestiality, I'll get it right in a minute. And then he finishes and he says in verse 24, "Defile not ye yourselves in any of these things." As I go down this list, do y'all see something? I mean, is there a common theme here from that day and time to now?
Could have been written yesterday.
Absolutely. And you don't need me to stand this morning and to go through each one of these, and it's pretty much self-explanatory. You know, the one that, and it's, Jason said it could have been written yesterday, the one that blew my mind was the part about 23. "Neither shalt thou lie with any beast to defile thyself therewith, neither shall any woman stand before a beast to lie down thereto. It is confusion." The term for that is bestiality, if I pronounced that correctly. And for those of you that don't know what that means, it means sexual activities with an animal. And you say, "Oh, Andy, come on, seriously, there's nobody that..." It was on WXII News this past week or last week one, where a man, I believe it was in Greensboro, was charged with this very crime. And if it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have known what it was talking about. But it blew my mind. And if you want your mind to be blown, don't go to Google and type in people that's been charged with it, because it will blow your mind when it starts listing out newspaper articles and you go to reading about some of the crazy things that's going on in society today. And you think it's not happening around here, guess again, my friend, because it is.
There's a whole lot of people think more of their animals than they do their own family.
That's the truth.
But what's sad is, as much as that blows our mind, 50 to 100 years ago, divorce would have been the same way.
Yeah.
Now that's nothing in
Yep.
society. Within 25 years ago, homosexuality would have been the same.
That's
way.
right.
Well, today, if you don't think that's okay, then you're just a nut.
That's right.
I mean, what's 25 more years gonna be?
That's
Just
exactly
all I
right.
see is, how close to Sodom and Gomorrah does it have to get to step in and say enough's enough?
Yep, you're exactly right, and we're gonna get a little bit deeper into that, and it just, God was warning the Israelites here. He's trying to warn us this morning. He's trying to get us to open our eyes. You know, one of the things was talking about sacrificing children, and you think, who would do that? Well, again, you'd be amazed. In this day and time, it talked about the fire to Moloch. Moloch was a god there in the ancient East, and as much as I think of my children, I can't think of sacrificing them in any kind of connotation, shape, form, or fashion.
Well, did you not, was that lady that little 5-year-old girl got raped and murdered? Her mother, if I'm not confusing two stories, her mother owed this guy a drug debt and gave her 5-year-old youngin to this man, and he's raped and killed. Is that not right? What's that? Is that child sacrifice?
I don't know any other way to explain it.
And I think that was in South County, or somewhere down there.
It's time we woke up and quit just saying, well, it'll be all right. It's time that we live separate, by both from society standards and from these sinful practices it talks about here in verses 20 through 26. In verse 25, and Jason was about to steal my thunder there, I thought. Said, the land is defiled, therefore I do visit the iniquity thereupon it, and the land itself vomiteth out her inhabitants. Basically, it's saying here that God said He'd caused the land to purge itself of this wickedness. Now, if He was thinking that in Moses' day, can you imagine what He's thinking today about this land? America specifically? The whole world is a rule, but America specifically. How long will how much, like Jason said, how much longer will He allow us to continue in the path we're on as a society? But He says in verse 26, ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of you your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you. And the term statutes here is translated the same as ordinances was back in verse 4 that we read earlier. Like we've already touched on in today's society, no longer considers a lot of the sexual behaviors to be wrong. But I want to remind you this morning, our standard in right from wrong is not to be determined by society. It's to be determined by this book right here. And we need to line up with what it has to say and what God has to say. And like I wrote down here, if it was a sin in Moses' day, you can better believe it's still a sin today because God hasn't changed. Finally, over in chapter number 20, verses 6 through 8, it talks about separate from thought spirituality. And when I first saw that, I thought, well, there's not much to say about that. But the more I read, the more I realized there's a lot to say about it. It says, and the soul that turneth after such as have familiar spirits, and after wizards, to go a-whoring after them, I will even set my face against that soul, and will cut him off from among his people. Sanctify yourselves therefore, and be ye holy, for I am the Lord your God, and ye shall keep my statutes, and do them. I am the Lord which sanctify you. As Israel entered into Canaan, they were confronted with various types of occult practices, as well as the belief in extra biblical elements such as ghosts. God's warning them here to be separate from this false spirituality, and reminds them to sanctify themselves and be holy, for He's the Lord your God, or our God. Simply put, you've got all you need in me. You don't need to be looking at all these other things in this world. I, your God, have given you and provided for you all that you need. And I think today, even as Christians, a lot of times, that seems so simple, almost too good to be true, that, well, it just can't be that simple. That if I trust in God, He'll give me everything I need. And society as a whole just can't grasp how simple it is. But if we'll just turn to Him and look to Him, He's going to provide for us. If we're one of His children, He's going to give us everything that we need. We don't need to go out looking at other areas of life to get fulfillment in what we need. He'll fulfill it for us. You know, and I talked about, and I'm sorry if I jump around a little bit here, but talking about being separate from society. You know, there's all grades of social media that's really turned on strong in the last 5 years. You've got, I'll miss something, but you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you've got, for you ladies especially, Pinterest, and all this other stuff that you can go out and share and see and do and talk about what other people's doing. Well, I see, you know, Facebook's the only one that I'm addicted to, okay? So, but, I mean, you get on there and you look, and you see professing Christians talking about and being involved in worldly stuff. And that's what God's trying to tell the Israelites, and that's what He's trying to tell us this morning, that we've got to live a separate life. We've got to live a separated lifestyle from this world. And as I thought about this, thought spirituality, and meditate on it a little bit more, and you think about all these people that, and if you're in here and you're guilty of this, I don't know who you are, but I'm sorry, I'll pray for you. But these people that will, first thing of the morning, has got to find out what their horoscope says for the day. You don't need to be worried about your horoscope. You need to be worried about what this book says for your life. And you need to be on your knees asking God to show you what today's going to bring, to guide you through the day. One of the things from the lesson, well, and that's not the only one. I hear it more frequently than I once did, and I've seen it in obituaries that so-and-so passed away, and there'll be a such and such service, and the service will be conducted by Jason Couch. I can use him. By Jason Couch, their spiritual advisor. Unto God.
Bless their heart.
Well, I mean, I used his name as a generic, but just think about that. This right here ought to be what's advising us. Chris Carter stood this morning and preached enough Bible to save the lost. It just, you know, maybe it's, I know not everybody thinks like I do, which is probably a good thing, but a 2007 survey found that 1 in 20 American adults have consulted a psychic or some other form of medium for spiritual guidance within the past 30 days. That was in 2007. 1 in 20. Who's the 2 in here that's been talking to the shrink? Casey's one, I believe. If it was 1 in 20 in 2007, imagine what it is today. Are the ones that's going to get their palm read or to whatever it may be. The point I'm trying to get across this morning, and I hope I've made it clear, is we've got to be separate in everything that we do. And that is so difficult sometimes. I don't know if I've shared with y'all, but one of the things that Sandra and I determined when our kids was very young, and you can look down at me, I don't care. I've got peace with the Lord about it. But one of the things that we done with our children was from day one, when they was old enough to talk, we explained to them the reality of Santa Claus. We just was upfront and said, it's Mom and Daddy. We didn't try to bring it out, because I had a man tell me one time, a preacher tell me, and it stuck with me, is that you go for years and you tell your children about, whether it be Santa Claus or whatever it may be, then they only find out that you weren't telling them the truth. And then you tell them about, whether it be the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy, how do you expect them to believe you when you go to tell them about Jesus Christ? And it was very personal to me, and it was something that, like I said, that Sandra and I chose to do as parents. And I cannot tell you how much grief I caught for many years from coworkers that made fun of me and laughed at me, but I could care less. Like I said, I had peace in my heart about what we had done. And you know, it's tough decisions like that we as believers have to make sometimes to live this separate lifestyle. When someone comes to our home, we want them to be able to discern what we're doing is, hey, the Darnells, they don't live like it. You know, they don't do the things that my other buddies do. Brenda goes spend the night with somebody, she'll come home. She's cased the joint, found out, you know, what's going on. But I commend her for it, because she will, you know, Alex went somewhere with a buddy of his one time. Well, he went over to spend a few hours with him, and I don't remember, he wound up spending the night or whatever, and they went to supper. Well, the little boy spending the night with, when they went to supper, his daddy drunk a beer. Well, Alex come home and told him, okay, note to self, he don't go back to that house. Spend the night. I'm sorry. That's, you know, no rocks at me. I don't care. That's just the way we do it. But we've got to live that separate lifestyle. We've got to be different from the world. What we do does not need to line up with what's going on in Hollywood or in Atlanta, Georgia, or Raleigh. It needs to line up with what's going on in God's Word. And hopefully I've said something this morning that'll be a blessing to you, or be a challenge to you. I know, like I said when I started, if nobody else in this class needs this lesson, I need it. I needed to hear it this morning. And not only did I need to hear it, I need to live it. I need to live it. I appreciate y'all's attention this morning. And I appreciate the trust of Chris puts in me to stand up and teach what he's not had. Word on anybody's heart.
Are you trying to say there's not Santa Claus?
You're funny, right?